When Jamila first opened the door to their little brick house after her wedding, she and her husband had leaned the broom together and laughed at the squeak of the new hinges. Years later, those same hinges remembered the nights Adil learned to crawl across the living room carpet, the evenings of slow dancing in the kitchen, the arguments that ended in apologies, and quiet Sunday mornings with tea cooling in chipped cups. The house was not merely walls and a roof. It was a ledger of a life, a map of small mercies and stubborn love. After her husband's slow illness and the muted funeral, Jamila felt the room stretch eternally. Loneliness settled in the corners like dusk. Her son called often at first, voice thick with sorrow and obligation. "Come stay with us, Amma," he said on the third week. "You shouldn't be alone." So she packed the geranium pots from the sill, folded his small shirts that still smelled faintly of his father, and moved 3 streets over into Adil's house. At first, the new house felt like a warm doorway, loud, messy, full of life. Zara, Adil's wife, was polite and brisk. She accepted Jamila's help with the baby and the kitchen with a practiced smile. Jamila took to the routine the way someone takes to knitting. Patient motions, the comfort of repetition. She made tea, washed bottles, swept crumbs from the table. She found a chair by the window and, on rainy afternoons, watched her grandson press his small face to the glass, leaving warm, wet fingerprints like tiny signatures. Little things like soap disappearing from the bathroom or the locked pantry door. Jamila brushed off as quirks of a busy household. When the first tension arrived, it was paper, then a missed birthday, a curt reply. When the second tension came, it was thicker. Curt looks at the electric bill, the occasional sigh when Jamila left a light on. She told herself these were storms that would pass. Mothers learned patience, but patience wears thin. The first time Jamila heard Zara say, "She doesn't even chip in," over the phone the phrase lodged like a splinter. It was followed by the casual cruelty of withdrawal plates that were put away in lower cupboards, small acts of exclusion like a locked drawer, a toothbrush removed from the sink. Adil, who had once kissed his mother's forehead in the doorway each morning, began to look elsewhere when Jamila entered the room, as if shame could be hidden behind an armored indifference. Jamila tried to speak about it once, the words small and soft on her lips. "I can cook more, I can." She began and stopped because the look Adil gave her was not of anger but of exhaustion, and exhaustion was a place no one wanted to enter together. So she retreated to the quiet practices that had kept her whole for decades, sweeping, watering the plants, talking aloud to the photograph of her husband on the mantel. Each day she measured her love in tiny actions. In the way she folded towels and smoothed the grandson's blanket. Each night she slept with the echo in her bones that the house, which had once been sanctuary, had begun to feel like a place where she had to prove her worth. And in that slow erosion, the whispering, the arrangements that left no room for her, something stubborn lit inside Jamila. Not vengeance, not yet, but a small, resolute ember of self-preservation that would not be smothered by the casual cruelty of others. It was a Sunday morning wrapped in pale silence, the kind of morning when Jamila would usually hum an old song as she swept the porch. The smell of jasmine drifted from the garden, and her grandson's laughter echoed faintly from inside. She thought perhaps today would be kind, but fate had other plans. Zara's voice shattered the calm. "Pay the rent or get out." Jamila froze, broom still in hand. The words hung in the air, sharp and unreal. She turned slowly, her frail fingers tightening around the broom handle, as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the earth. "Rent," she whispered. What do you mean, rent?" Zara crossed her arms, her expression icy. "I mean exactly what I said. You've been living here for months, eating our food, using our electricity, and not paying a single rupee. We can't keep supporting you." Jamila's heart pounded. She looked at Adil, who stood in the doorway, avoiding her eyes. Adil, she said softly, her voice trembling. Beta, tell her this isn't true. This house. Zara interrupted, pulling out a folder from the dining table, is now under Adil's name. The deed was transferred after your husband passed. You're welcome to stay here, but only if you pay rent. Like any other tenant, Jamila's world tilted. Her husband had built this house brick by brick. He had poured his savings, his sweat, and his dreams into it. And now the daughter-in-law she once treated like her own daughter was demanding rent for her own home. She felt dizzy, the edges of her vision blurring. But your father never. Adil finally spoke, his tone cold. Amy, Zara's right. Times are hard. We have our own expenses. You can stay, but you'll need to contribute. It's only fair. The word felt like poison. This was the same son whose diapers she had washed, whose school fees she had paid when his father's business collapsed. The same son she had stayed up all night for, praying for his exams, cooking his favorite meals. Now he looked at her as though she were a stranger. Jamila didn't respond. She quietly turned, went to her small room, and closed the door. Her hands shook as she clutched her husband's photograph. You hear that? She whispered through tears. They want me to pay rent in our home. She sat on the edge of the bed until the sun dipped below the window. The laughter from the living room stung her ears. They were watching TV, eating dinner. Life moved on without her pain. But beneath the grief, something hardened inside her. The humiliation had planted a seed, a quiet, determined strength. She wiped her tears and looked again at her husband's photo. You once said, never let anyone steal your peace, she murmured. Maybe it's time I listen. That night, while everyone slept, she opened the old drawer where her husband's documents rested. The faint smell of paper and dust filled the air. Her trembling fingers brushed over a sealed envelope marked with his handwriting. Inside lay the truth, one that would change everything. The next morning, Jamila rose with a calm she hadn't felt in years. Zara's cruel words still echoed in her mind, but this time they didn't break her. They forged her. If they wanted to treat her like an outsider, she would show them what true ownership looked like. The morning light crept gently across Jamila's small room as she sat with a cup of tea cooling. Beside her, the letter she had found the night before lay open on the table, trembling slightly in her wrinkled hands. Her late husband's signature, strong, steady, unmistakable, was there on the property deed. He had never completed the ownership transfer. The house, in the eyes of the law, still belonged to her. A slow, bittersweet smile spread across her face. For the first time in years, she felt something powerful awaken inside her, a sense of control, of justice long denied. She dressed carefully that morning, wearing the same pale blue shawl her husband had given her on their last anniversary. It felt like armor. She left quietly while Zara was on a video call, and Adil was getting ready for work. No one noticed her departure. At the lawyer's office, the air was thick with the smell of old books and dust. Mr. Rahim, her husband's old friend and attorney, looked up in surprise when she entered. Jamila Begum, he said kindly. It's been a long time. She told him everything, Zara's words, the so-called rent, the humiliation. The lawyer's expression softened as he listened. Then he opened the file she'd brought. Your husband never finalized the transfer to Adil, he explained. Legally, this house is yours. You have every right to do what you wish with it. The words washed over her like a sunrise after years of rain. She sat quietly for a moment, then said, I want to sell it. Mr. Rahim blinked in surprise. Are you sure it's your home? Jamila's voice was calm. It was my home. They turned it into something else. I want my peace back, not walls that remind me of betrayal. Over the next few days, everything moved quietly. Mr. Rahim arranged for the sale, and Jamila signed the necessary papers in secret. She used the quiet hours of the afternoon, when Zara went shopping and Adil worked late, to visit the notary and finalize the deal. Each signature she placed on paper felt like a wound closing. When the sale was complete, the payment went directly into her account. The house that had been her prison was now her freedom. The buyers, a retired couple with kind smiles, promised they would cherish it. That evening, Jamila cooked dinner as usual. The smell of cumin and rice filled the kitchen. Zara walked in, tossing her purse on the counter. "Finally cooked something decent," she muttered, scrolling through her phone. Jamila didn't reply. She simply looked at her, calm and silent. In her heart, she already knew Zara's arrogance was about to crumble. Later that night, when everyone had settled, Jamila sat at the dining table and placed a sealed envelope neatly beside Zara's favorite cup. Inside was a copy of the sale deed and a polite letter. The next morning, the scream came just as the sun rose. "What is this?" Zara shrieked, waving the papers in disbelief. "You sold the house?" Jamila looked up from her tea, her face serene. "Yes, dear, the house was mine. I sold it yesterday. The new owners will be moving in soon. I suggest you start packing." Zara's jaw dropped, her face turning pale. "You can't do this." "Oh, but I already have." Jamila replied softly. "You told me to pay rent or get out, so I decided to let everyone get out." In the stunned silence that followed, Jamila sipped her tea, the faintest hint of satisfaction curling her lips. The woman they had treated as a burden had just outsmarted them all, and she had done it with grace. The house was no longer filled with the laughter that once made it a home. Instead, the air crackled with tension and disbelief. Zara's voice echoed through the hallway as she stormed after Jamila. "You can't just sell it. Where are we supposed to go?" Jamila turned slowly, her calm composure cutting through Zara's chaos. "You told me to pay rent or get out," she said softly. "So, I did one better. I made sure no one had to pay rent again." Adil stood nearby, his shoulders slumped, eyes filled with regret. He looked so much like his father in that moment that Jamila's heart ached. "Ami," he began weakly, "you should have talked to me." She smiled sadly. "I tried, Adil, but you stopped listening a long time ago." Zara's face twisted with anger. "You're selfish, after everything we did for you." Jamila's laughter was quiet, but it struck like a bell. "Everything you did for me. My dear, I raised the man who gave you this roof. You inherited what I built, and then you tried to throw me out of it." Her words hung heavy in the room. For once, Zara was speechless. 3 days later, the new owners arrived, a gentle, older couple who greeted Jamila with warmth and respect. They thanked her for keeping the home in such good condition, and she handed over the keys with steady hands. Behind her, Adil and Zara loaded their things into the car in awkward silence. Before she left, Adil hesitated. "Ami," he whispered, "please don't go. I made mistakes. I let her treat you poorly. I'm sorry." Jamila touched his cheek gently. "I forgive you, Beta, but forgiveness doesn't mean staying in the same place to be hurt again." With that, she walked away, her suitcase small, her steps sure. Weeks later, Jamila stood on the porch of her new seaside cottage. The air was crisp, the waves hummed softly, and peace finally wrapped itself around her shoulders. She brewed tea for herself and watched the sunset paint the sky in gold and rose. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. No shouting, no demands, no locked doors, only the sound of her own heart, steady and unbroken. Her revenge hadn't been cruel, it had been poetic. The woman they tried to evict had instead evicted her pain and started a new life built on dignity, not pity.